This is Renee Pillor with Pro-Life Unity. We're here today to talk with Jamie Radtke, the U.S. Virginia Senate candidate. We're so pleased to have Jamie Radtke with us today here in Northern Virginia, in Ashburn, Virginia, and she's running for the U.S. Senate for Virginia. So we wanted to take the moment to ask you, would you, if you were in office, how would you change the way things are now in Virginia?
Well, I really want to go back to something novel, which is to go back to a constitutional republic. You know, we've grown the size of government both in the Republican and Democratic Party to everybody's benefit except for the working families. And we need to go back to what it is that the founders created, which was a constitutional republic that they thought that few and defined powers should be in Washington, D.C. They thought the remaining powers are reserved to the states and the individual. And if we truly believe in that, then Washington, D.C. should look a lot different than it does now.
So you're saying size of government is a huge factor?
It is. It's what they're getting involved in all aspects of our life, whether it's our health care, whether it's what car we should have, whether it's groceries, whether it's gas, whether it's all sorts of things. And it's not a role of the federal government. So, yeah, shrinking the size of the federal government and putting the power back into the states and to the individuals.
So we're not saying don't deal with those issues, just put them back in the state's hands.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so what about the life issue? How would you apply that? What would you do differently?
Well, I mean, I am one that believes that life begins at conception. I believe that life is valuable regardless of the circumstances in which brought that child into the world. And we often hear about making exceptions for rape or for incest, and life is valuable regardless. And so I think it's important that we uphold life at all levels of government. And also, obviously, for the United States Senate, as a senator, it's very important to know where your senator stands, because they're in charge of nominating and voting on Supreme Court justices. And that's going to have a huge bearing on the direction of the country and our position on life moving forward. So
under life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you underline the life, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, life is... You know, we have a very real fear of devaluing life, not only in the womb, but also at the other end for seniors. And we've got to be careful that we don't forget that our fundamental right is our right to life, and all human life inside the womb, and no matter what age you are, even if you're an elderly person. And it's very disconcerting to me to see the federal government stepping in and trying to make judgments about what they consider valuable life and what isn't. All God's creation is precious and valuable, and government doesn't really have a position to say one way or the other.
Yeah, especially when we're deciding on other people's lives. But isn't it true that in Roe versus Wade, the whole argument was that this isn't really a person?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. It really, they used the 14th Amendment, and they were talking about whether or not it was a person or not. I find it fascinating that you really don't find that argument much anymore from the left. I hear from my opponent on the Democrat side, Tim Kaine, says that he is personally pro-life but publicly pro-choice. And I think, you know, what does that mean? I mean, if you believe that it's life, then you should be doing everything you can to protect that life and not end it. And if you don't think it's life, then, you know, who cares how many abortions that you have? Because you often hear Democrats will say, well, I'm politically pro-choice, but I want to limit the number of abortions. And that doesn't pass the very basic logic test, because if you don't think it's life, why would you care how many abortions there are in this country? And so there's some inconsistency in their arguments. Mm-hmm. You can't be personally one way and politically another, especially when it comes to the fundamental issue of protecting life.
Yes, and if you see a crime enacted, you could be personally against what somebody is doing, but if you allow it, you're sort of just letting it happen. There's certain things, even if we're personally not for it, we have to stand up for things. Like, we have to stand up for the laws of protecting people. Even if we think it's okay to wrestle, if somebody's killing somebody, you can't just sit there and let it happen.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that we have as a nation, and we frown upon, and rightly so, China's one-child policy, and think that it is offensive and immoral, and yet we support abortion as a country in the United States. So there's a little bit of being a hypocrite, I guess you could say.
And we're funding a lot of that.
We are absolutely funding a lot of it. There's a lot of federal spending that we take through AID and give all across the country to support things that are not consistent with what we believe in as Americans. Well, my position on foreign aid in general has been that it needs to be significantly reined in. I'm not for eliminating 100% of foreign aid, but there's also just the practical matter that we're broke. And to borrow money from China and then turn around and give it to Mexico or Pakistan or wherever, and we pay the interest payments and we don't have the money to pay for these other things outside of, not talking about abortion, but these other programs that we're in, doesn't make sense. And then you add insult to everything, because then you're not only are you giving money you don't have, but you're giving it to fund things that are immoral. And so my position on foreign aid is that we need to completely re-examine how we're giving money to countries and really prioritize that, and certainly not be supporting these social programs. It's not a core function of the federal government to be sponsoring social programs in any capacity. There's a lot of inconsistency in what we're doing, but the number one job of the federal government should be to protect life. And that's one of the things that we've been falling down on. And sponsoring it, and even coming to the point now where we're trying to tell doctors that they have to provide certain services, or nurses that they have to provide certain services, or same thing with churches, again, is against our conscience as individuals, but as a nation, that's not what we want to be promoting either.
That's never happened until Obama, has it?
Not that I know of.
Right. So we want to make sure that we keep the values that were core and fundamental intact. Is that what you want?
The moment we as a nation decide that life isn't valuable, is the moment that we start going in a very different direction that we don't want to be in. And that's been a direction we've been headed now for over 30, 40 years. And it's a very dangerous road to go on. We want to protect life. You want to protect liberty. You want to protect property. Those are the very basic rights that don't come from government. So government shouldn't be able to take them away. Those rights come from God. They're inherent. And if God gives them, God gives life, and God takes away life. And so government should be able to take away those fundamental rights.
So, Jamie, are you ready to end abortion?
I've been on record in saying that if we believe that life begins at conception, and then we need to end abortion, it needs to be outlawed. I've been asked about this question before, and that's what I would hope with being a senator and having the opportunity to nominate a Supreme Court justice, or hopefully more than one, that believes that Roe v. Wade was a wrong ruling and that it needs to be reversed. It's one thing to talk the talk, it's another thing to walk the walk, and we need to be protecting life, and that's one of the things that I would want to do as a United States Senator.
A lot of times pro-life people are painted as people who don't support research.
Right. No, I think we would support research, and I think there's, from what I've read, I haven't studied it very closely, but what I've read, there's been a lot of progress on adult stem cell research. But again, don't support embryonic stem cell research. And it's, again, one of those things where you don't want to be experimenting with the fundamentals of life. And that's what that is with embryonic stem cell research. And so to support adult stem cell research, I think, is the way to go. And it was very unfortunate to see that change again under the Obama administration, where President Bush had cut that off using, and to see a reverse of that was very disappointing.
The promise is really in adult stem cell research, and why would we spend more money going in a direction that actually does snuff out a life to do research when we could do more? And we've had many uses already for that, adult stem cell research. But
yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Jamie, can you tell us what the difference between you and George Allen is on the abortion issue?
Yeah, it's he often says that he has a 100% record on his pro-life, which, they tell you the votes and to vote on, and oftentimes they're not as controversial as they could be. But you've got to find somebody who's going to advocate and push for life, or push for the personhood bill, or who's going to look at Supreme Court justices and say, are they willing to protect life when it comes up to ruling on those things like Roe v. Wade. As far as a practical matter, George Allen has said that he is for exceptions for rape, incest, or life of the mother. He thinks that abortions are okay for that. He has also been on record as saying that he thinks that abortions are okay up until viability. And of course, most of us know that almost all abortions take place in the first trimester when there's not quote-unquote viability. So that would eliminate a lot of the opportunities to protect life. He owns stock in or at least he did own stock in the morning after the abortion pill through Bar Labs. And he was asked in a debate once what he would do if his daughter were to get pregnant. And he said, well, I'd have to talk to my wife, and we'd have to figure out what was best for our daughter, which didn't seem like a strong position for protecting your grandchildren. So those are things that are of deep concern to me, and I think of deep concern to most people who believe in the sanctity of life.
So more and more we're seeing that science is showing that life begins at conception, something that used to be debated in the past and probably was the reason that Roe versus Wade ever even passed to begin with. So thank you for your time, Jamie.
Thank you. So we need to do everything we can to fight for life and to show compassion to women who have been through abortions, and to talk about the issue and not hide it. And so I would just encourage you to continue to push for what is most precious in God's sight, which is His own creation.